everybody, this is Detroit Alley Cat. Welcome back to my channel. Today is True Crime Tuesday, but it's looking like this might end up on YouTube on Wednesday. So if it is, sorry about that. Just took me a lot of time to do research for this case, and it took me a lot of time to pick out the case that I wanted to pick out. Without further ado, let's hop into the case. I would like to put out a disclaimer really quick because I really wanted to do something light and not like a really heavy case, but unfortunately this ended up being a pretty heavy case. So before you jump into this video with me and like spend time listening to the case, I just want to say that there are going to be children that are going to be killed in this case, and it's a mass murderer. So it was quite a violent crime. It's a historical crime, but it is quite a violent crime, and one that I ended up like researching and spending time getting to know it, and then thinking that it wasn't going to be so bad and ended up realizing it was pretty bad. So I just want to put that out there in case you don't want to watch this with me. But for those of you that do, without further ado, let's get spooky. As you know, we live here in Michigan, and Michigan is like two bodies of soil. One looks like a mitt, the other one looks like a rabbit. And it's crazy because a lot of Michigan's history is very rural, and it seems like you wouldn't have a lot of violent crimes, but for some reason in Michigan we have a lot of serial killers and mass murderers and a lot of violent crimes. And I was doing a lot of research on it, and one particular case really stood out to me that was just, I'd never heard of it before, so it was really crazy and it was really interesting. It's one of the first mass school killings, and it's actually got the most casualties. It's like 3 times more than Columbine, and what I'm talking about is called the Bath mass bombing. And what's very unique about this case is it's not a case that was like up to date. This was back in 1927, and it was known as one of the first bombings in the United States, which of course it would be in Michigan, right? Today we're going to be talking about somebody whose name is Andrew Kehoe. Andrew Kehoe was born in Tecumseh, Michigan. He was one of 13 kids. He lived in a middle-class family. They weren't rich or wealthy. A lot of the families in Tecumseh at that time, they were farm families, so it's very rural. It's very hard living, a lot of work. And it said that Andrew's mother ended up dying at a very young age, and his father remarried another woman, and he did not get along with his new stepmom. And back in the day, their ovens, they had cooking oil inside of it, and so the pilot light went out, and she went to go relight the pilot light, and I don't know how this happened, but she ended up getting drenched in cooking oil. And when she went to go relight the pilot light, she started on fire, and it said that Andrew sat there watching her while she burned before he put her out with a bucket of water. So fun fact, oil can't be put out with water, so I thought that that was a really interesting thing to read, because that would just make the fire way worse. But what I thought was something worth noting is that he just sat there and watched her for 2 minutes while she sat there burning. Like, most people would be freaking out trying to figure out, like, what do I do, and like running around the house trying to get something to put them out. But he just kind of sat there watching her. And because she didn't get put out until like a certain amount of time, she ended up dying from her wounds that she was inflicted. This is way back in the day, so there probably wasn't really a lot of burn units. There probably was, but not like medical science is today. So she ended up dying, and he was only 14 years old when this happened. So just think about that, a 14-year-old sitting there watching someone burning in front of them. that kind of speaks to his character and kind of gives you like some foreshadowing of the events that are going to occur. Andrew Kehoe ended up attending Tecumseh High School, Michigan. Then he went to Michigan State College, and then later went to Michigan State University. This is where he ended up meeting his wife. Her name was Ellen Price, but they nicknamed her Nellie, and that's what they called her. She was the daughter of a wealthy Lansing family. They got married in 1912 and moved around until 1919. They bought a 185-acre farm outside of a community called Bath, and they ended up buying this farm from Nellie's aunt, and Nellie's aunt sold them the farm for $12,000, and they paid $6,000 upfront cash, and $6,000 was put to a lending company for a mortgage. Kehoe's neighbors said that he was extremely intelligent. They said that he wasn't a very good farmer though, and he was known for tinkering around with electrical stuff or working on like the tractor, or like that's what they noticed, is that he liked to tinker around with stuff, like doing like hard labor and things like that. That wasn't really like Andrew Kehoe's thing. He was more of intellect, as you want to say. He was always dressed neat. He was meticulous about his outfit. If he was dirty, he would change his outfit on midday. And that's kind of like an odd thing, especially for somebody who owned a farm, like to be completely not dirty, very meticulous about your outfits. That's just not the farm life in Michigan, especially at that time. Something that the neighbors did notice that kind of really upset me was that Kehoe was cruel to his animals. And one of his neighbors said that they actually witnessed him beat one of his horses to death. I think it really speaks to somebody's character if they end up beating on an animal and they can kill an animal. It just means you are one sick. Just saying. He ended up having a reputation of being a penny pincher, and he was known throughout the county for his thriftiness. And he was actually eventually elected as the treasurer of the Consolidated School of Bath in 1924. And the thing that Kehoe fought endlessly for was to make sure that the county did not raise their taxes. He thought that this was very important, and he really, really fought hard about it. And something to note is that there was a superintendent that was in charge of this school, and his name was Emery Hick. And Andrew Kehoe did not like Emery. He thought that he just was very frivolous with the money. He didn't like his ideas, and he accused him of a financial mismanagement. In 1925, he was elected to the Bath Township clerk, but lost his position due to re-election within that year. I just got this really funny feeling that Kehoe was not exactly the most loved. But there's different accounts of him. A lot of the kids from the school say he was a really nice person, but that there was other people that said that he was not a nice person. So I guess it kind of really depended who you were to Andrew and if he liked you. Nellie Kehoe was pretty sick during this whole time. She ended up getting tuberculosis. And a lot of the time that, Andrew was farming or working at the school, she was in and out of the hospital, and it said that that was probably why Andrew Kehoe eventually started having problems with his finances. And they said that, all these hospital visits were very costly, and he just could not keep on top of it. And he felt that probably put the family in debt. Around 1926, Andrew stopped paying his mortgage, and he stopped paying his homeowner's insurance, and that was kind of an odd thing because he had been very on top of it. I guess a lot of people thought that, it was to do with his wife being in and out of the hospital, but there's something else that I know historically speaks about the time, the era of this time. The Great Depression was going on at this time, and this was like when things were really hard. People were losing their homes and not getting a lot of food, and there was no work. And so if he was just making money at the farm and he wasn't a very good farmer, there's a very good chance that he was probably running out of whatever money maybe Nellie had or whatever. But without a lot of money coming in and her being in the hospital a lot, that would put a lot of financial burdens on them. In 1926, the board asked Kehoe to do maintenance in the school. He was known to be a great electrician, and they knew that he was a really good handyman, so they thought it was a really good idea that he do some work around the school. And this probably helped Kehoe a lot because he wasn't making a lot of money doing farming, and so he did this along with farming. And it's just something to note is that he had a really nice house. I think that his farm was pretty nice. It was like a multi-level house, and it was known to have hard and soft water, which at that time it was kind of like a privilege, and it was heated and electric, and he had animals and different buildings with the farm. It was pretty big. In the summer of 1926, he purchased 1 ton of something called pyritol, and pyritol was used in World War I as an explosive. It's something that was commonly used on farms for blasting. You could take down trees, you could do a whole bunch of stuff that was kind of normal back in the day. And it was also said that he drove to Lansing to buy 2 boxes of dynamite. Now, that might sound kind of off, but for farmers that did a lot of work and landscaping and doing a lot of things, dynamite and explosives back in the day were common. And so nobody really thought anything of it. And something that Andrew Kehoe did, which he was smart about this. He drove all over. He would drive to this town to get some dynamite. Then he would drive to this town to get some dynamite. He would drive to this city to get pyritol, so nobody really knew how much he was buying or how much he was stocking up on. He was getting a lot of this stuff, and he was storing it at his farm, and nobody thought anything of it because they didn't know that he was doing this. And something else is that neighbors could hear explosions at his farm. And, when they asked Andrew about this, Andrew was just, oh, yeah, it was blowing a tree stump out of the ground. And that's normal. That was normal for the back in the day. But I happen to think that Andrew was probably practicing the art of making things explode and probably practicing timed explosion. There were warning signs that led up to the events that happened on 1927. He was in charge of the payroll for the school, and when he was handing out all of the checks to the different employees of the Bath Consolidated School, he handed Warden Keyes his check, and he basically said to him, and I quote, "My boy, you want to take good care of that check, as it will be the last check you will ever get." I think that at the time, because of the Great Depression and all of the economic problems that America was having, that, Warden Keyes didn't think anything of it, but it was pretty, I would have thought about it, but I didn't live back in 1927. So I think it sounds pretty creepy, to be honest. Prior to May 18th, Kehoe loaded the back seat of his car. He loaded it with old nails, shovels. He loaded it with tools, all this metal stuff in the back seat of his truck. And basically what he was doing is he was putting shrapnel in his truck. And for those of you that don't know what shrapnel is, I'm pretty sure a lot of you do, but some of you won't. Sometimes they pack it with different metal things that are in it. That way when it explodes, that it makes the metal go out, and basically they're bullets, but sometimes they could be bigger than bullets or smaller than bullets, and they're deadly, and that makes the bomb like so much more gruesome and deadly and just fierce. It's just, and that's what Andrew Kehoe wanted. He wanted to do some damage. 2 days before May 18th, 1927, Nellie was in the hospital, and Andrew came up there, and he ended up checking her out of the hospital. And what we are to find out later is that he basically took her home, and she was found in a wheelbarrow in front of their house, and she had died by blunt force trauma. And then what he had did is he took everything that was worth anything in his home. Back in the day, it was silverware and jewels, and then he even had, I guess, banknotes. Guessing that's money. He put that all by this silverware. And then, it's going to be disturbing. It was disturbing. He took all the animals and he tied them up in the barn. Tied them together and tied them up. And what he did is all these bombs set up at his house, and they were connected together. And what they were going to do is when they were detonated, they were going to burn down all of the buildings at his farm, including his house. And he set that off at 8:45 a.m. and it burned everything down. There's like one little stove left. And then it's just messed up because Nellie's body ended up getting burned really bad. And I'm guessing that the only way that they knew that she died of blunt force trauma was her skull was probably fractured. And then the next thing is that he went up to the Bath Consolidated School, and he was in there for like 2 minutes, and then he was said to be seen leaving the crime scene, and he was rushing out of there as fast as he could. And at 9:40 a.m. on May 18th, 1927, the school, the south wing of the school, was detonated, and it completely blew up. So this bombing comprised the deadliest act of mass murder in the school in U.S. history. The number of victims were 44 at that point. There were 3 men, 3 women, including his wife, and 38 children. He was the first bomber on U.S. soil to kill 45 people. Actually, it was like the first real bomber on U.S. soil, period. So after Andrew blew up the school, he ended up driving back to the school in his pickup truck that had all the shrapnel in the back of the truck. But now it didn't just have shrapnel in the back of the truck. He also had dynamite in the back of the truck. And he pulled up in front of the school, and it's kind of messed up because, like, at this point, the school is in complete madness. It said that there's children's bodies everywhere. There's body parts everywhere. There's mothers running up to the school, screaming, asking where their children are. They're seeing their kids on the ground, and there are these good citizens that are trying to help and triage because there were 245 kids in this school, and they're just everywhere. It is like really a mess, a complete and total mess. So while this is going on, the superintendent is out there, and then Andrew pulls up in his pickup truck, and he's got no idea that Andrew is the one that's responsible for this. And he tells him, "Hey, come here." And the superintendent comes up to him, and he was saying something to the superintendent. And he just turned around and took a gun and shot the dynamite, which blew up the truck. And not only did it blow up the truck, but all those things that he packed in the truck, like the shovels and the nails and all the metal pieces, they came flying out of the truck. And they didn't just kill the superintendent and Andrew, who had died that day of suicide. It also killed the postmaster, Glenn Smith, the postmaster's father-in-law, who was a retired farmer, Nelson McFerrin, and the saddest part of all is this little 8-year-old boy ended up climbing out of the school, and he was just like standing there watching the school burn and all these things happened. And then when Andrew Kehoe shot the dynamite and did that, the shrapnel got the little 8-year-old and he ended up dying too. And this little boy's name was Cleo Clayton. This story is just, it's super horrific, and it's just, I can't even imagine what it would look like. But it said that the town came together that day. Nobody stayed away. They all like jumped in to help these kids, to help these families, to get this cleaned up. Everybody had been told that, you know, something was going down with the Consolidated Schools and that they needed as much help as possible. All the fire, the ambulances, everybody, like all hands were on deck. All the neighbors of the neighborhood were there. Nobody just stood around, and they came together. And one of the stories was this couple that had actually come back from World War I. They decided they wanted to live in Bath and open up a pharmacy. So it was a Army veteran doctor and his wife, who was a nurse, and they ended up turning their pharmacy into a triage center for everybody that had been hurt in the bombing. And this was called the Crum Pharmacy. And so they're taking all these people from this bombing and they're having them in there and they're treating them. After this was all said and done, Kehoe's sister came to claim his body, and he ended up getting buried in a pauper section in Mount Rest Cemetery in St. John's in Clinton County, and he's in an unmarked grave. I've seen pictures of his gravestone, but I think that might have been put up a little bit later just to mark that area, just because maybe some of the surviving victims wanted to visit it. Don't know why, but sometimes they like to do that. It's part of the healing process. Nellie ended up getting buried. His wife ended up getting buried in Mount Hope in Lansing by her family. And when she was buried, she was no longer buried with his name. It wasn't Nellie Kehoe. She was buried back under her original name, which was Nellie Price. On August 22nd, 1928, Beatrice Gibbs, who was a 4th grader, was the last victim of the bombing to die. She ended up passing away during complications from a hip replacement surgery, and she was known as the last victim to end up dying. I want to go back through and talk about some of the other things that happened in the bombing because there was so much. So when they went back to the farmhouse that Andrew lived in, on his gate there was a sign. And always these mass murderers always like leave like a sign. Like Jim Jones left a sign, but Andrew had a sign, and it said, "Criminals are made, not born." And, you know, the reason why Andrew was so angry is because in the 20th century, a lot of the schools would be in these one-roomed schoolhouses. You know how you see Little House on the Prairie, and it's a little church, and there's all these kids in there. It doesn't matter what age they are. It doesn't matter what grade they are. They all have one teacher. They all have the same kind of books, and they all are learning, but they're all at different levels. Well, you know, that started to change because they wanted to teach their kids better. And so they started separating these kids into different grades and having different teachers, basically, you know, becoming more modern. And they wanted to do something called a consolidated school, which is basically you put all these kids in a building, but they were separated into different groups for their age, their classes. They had different teachers. And Andrew did not like this because that would raise the taxes. And the superintendent basically said, you know, this has to happen. We have to vote on this. And the people of Bath ended up voting on this. And they voted that, yes, they wanted their kids to get a better education. And it's kind of rough because, you know, in 1927, it's the time of the Great Depression. So it might not have been a great time for everyone to have their taxes raised. And it said that Andrew kind of blamed losing his house because when he stopped paying his mortgage and his homeowner's insurance, he started becoming in the process of foreclosure. So when all these bombings occurred, he was really close to having the bank take his house. And he felt that all of the people of Bath were responsible for him losing his home because the taxes getting raised is what pushed it over the edge. And he basically, that's how he lost everything. So the reason that he did this, and I think he wanted to have revenge on the people of Bath. And, you know, I've said this a lot. If you really want to hurt a society, if you really want to hurt a person, the children, that's where people strike. That's devastating. And that's what he did. He attacked these kids. And I think that that's crazy because there are accounts of him going into the school and he would be outside greeting all these kids and being really nice to them. And these are the same kids that he bombed. And later on, while they were doing like a cleanup of the school, they ended up finding underneath the school 500 pounds of dynamite. And the fire department ended up saying the only reason that the entire school, actually the entire town, didn't blow up is that there was some kind of switch that didn't go off. And just by luck, it didn't go off. So he didn't plan to just have the south wing blow up. He was trying to blow up the entire town of Bath. So not just the children, but everybody. And just by pure dumb luck that day, it didn't happen. There were a lot of people in town that actually described Kehoe as surly and a disliked character. But again, there were people that did like him. There were a lot of people that thought he was a nice person, especially a lot of the kids that were in the school that were actually interviewed afterwards. And what they found out is that Kehoe had probably been planning this bombing for up to a year prior to the actual event. And what he was doing is he was spending a lot of time in the basement and he was like wiring everything together. And because they had hired him, nobody thought twice about it. They just thought that he was trying to do some repairs on the building and save money, but not by not hiring an electrician. And, you know, again, he was very smart. He really kept this a huge secret. September 5th, 1927, school ended up returning and it was held in the community hall. It said that most of the surviving children that actually had survived the bombing had returned. I don't know how. Their parents didn't stress out, but they let their kids go back. And they ended up rebuilding the school across the street from the actual original site. And the entire site that had the old school was completely leveled down. They ended up building a park where that school is. And there's a monument right there. And it has like all the names of the people that died that day. And it also has the story of the school. And on top of the school, there was like this, I don't know if it was like a bell, but it was like an old fashioned, like the tip of the school. It's got a fancy name for it. But they ended up saving that and it's in the park to this day. And it's kind of a monument of what happened. In 1928, there was a copper statue that was unveiled and it's called a girl with a kitten statue. And it's actually it's in the Bath School Museum. And it's interesting because the statue was made by the Michigan students actually donating pennies, and the pennies were melted down to make this statue. And what the statue was supposed to represent is the courage and the ability for Michigan people to survive no matter what and to carry on, and it was supposed to give them hope. And I guess, it's still in the museum to this day, and I wonder why they chose like a little girl with a kitten. Maybe like the innocence that was lost that day. That is the story of Andrew Kehoe and the Bath bombing murders. It's a pretty crazy story, and I thought it was very interesting. I'm definitely going to post a lot of the pictures of the survivors. And, I was actually thinking about heading up there this week because it's supposed to be the old park that it's at, which is called the Bath Consolidated Memorial Park, is supposed to be one of the most haunted places in Michigan. So I kind of wanted to go up there and just check it out. I have to say, like, the story started out with this like old-timey, old-fashioned charm, and it just ended up really making me nauseous at the end. A lot of the pain that I heard about the students, the mothers of the students, and the screaming and the body parts and how it sounded, it was just a war all over again. And just the pure cruel arrogance of Andrew Kehoe, it kind of shocked me. I didn't expect that, and I didn't expect that here in Michigan. This place is so close to my house, and it's crazy. It's not that close, but I mean, it's decently close. And I guess it's like a huge national tragedy. And yeah, so that's it, guys. That's my story of the Bath bombing murders and how crazy evil people can be. I guess they said he was a psychopath. Did you guys think that he sounded like a psychopath? I think he sounded like he had some mental issues. Definitely. I don't know what you would call that. I mean, psychopath? I don't know. He killed his wife. He killed all those kids. He killed like all those people. He had problems. And I mean, if you want to look at it, it kind of is a story of the resilience of the American people, but it definitely is a tragedy. So anyway, I hope you guys liked hearing about the gruesome history of Michigan. If you enjoy my content, please think about subscribing, leaving me a comment, telling me what you thought about this story. Did it catch you off guard? Did you know that we had that kind of history here in Michigan? As always, stay safe and stay spooky. Bye.